today we come to the book of Daniel. It's a very strange book in the sense that it's a very familiar book. Every Sunday school kid knows Daniel and the lion's den and the stories. And yet, it's a very unfamiliar book because the prophecies in the second part of Daniel baffle Christians. Right? So in one sense, easy book. In another sense, almost totally impossible to understand without spiritual understanding. Okay? Now, the first part of the book of Daniel is about his life, about Daniel. The second part is about his visions or dreams, right, which are prophetic. Now, this book is often said to be the key to biblical prophecy. You know some of the principles, it will help you understand prophecy. Now, this book is written in two languages. Only two books in the Bible are written in two languages, Ezra and Daniel. The two languages are Aramaic and Hebrew. Right? In these two books, there are two languages. What is Aramaic? Aramaic is the common language of that region, that whole area. Can we say the global language and in those days in that part of the world? Aramaic is a cousin, linguistically speaking, with Hebrew, right? But it's a different language. And so, in the first part, chapter 1 of this book of Daniel, written in Hebrew, and then chapter 8 to 12, the last part, the visions part, the hard to understand part, Hebrew again. The easy part, the stories, chapter 2 to chapter 7, written in Aramaic. What's the purpose? I don't know. Maybe the Aramaic part, let the public read it. The people in those days wanted to read what Daniel wrote, and the Aramaic part they would understand because there was no translated Bible. So they saw the Aramaic part. Oh, it's very interesting. Daniel's life, amazing, right? But the prophecy part is in Hebrew, and so the non-Hebrews could not read it, which is good because, I mean, honestly, you couldn't understand it if you were not a child of God, and you could care less anyway, right? So please don't ask a non-believer to read the prophecy part of Daniel. You just totally confuse him. Now, before we go into the nit and grit and confuse ourselves, let's see the big theme of the book of Daniel. The big theme is kingdoms. God allows kingdoms to rise and to fall. Ultimately, all right, every kingdom goes through the same cycle. God allows it to rise. When men have power, they have pride. When they have pride, they become cruel, they become corrupt, and they cause misery to their people, and then God brings them down and brings another one up. Okay, we study in Chinese history, the dynasties, they start pretty well. Then after a while, they go into that cycle of corruption and power and cruelty and etc. And then God brings them down. So basically the theme is ultimately all human kingdoms are going to fail us. But ultimately, in the end of time, whenever that will be, there will be one kingdom, God's kingdom. That's what this book's all about. All right, so many kingdoms here. You see every dream is about different kingdoms coming up, rising, right? And now one replaces it. And then at the end of it all, one kingdom is going to come up. And that's God's kingdom, bringing not pain, but peace, right? So I hope that you see the big picture. And if anytime you lose the big picture, you lose it all. And you see God ultimately has a plan for us, that we will live in the ultimate kingdom of God. Be patient, right? Now, basically, there are certain sub-themes, I would say, okay? Sub-themes. The big theme is that. The sub-theme is There are three stories of faithfulness. In chapter 1, how Daniel and his three friends refused to eat the food of the pagans, right? Then in chapter 3, the three friends of Daniel refused to bow to the idol. And then lastly, chapter 6, Daniel himself refuses to pray to the king. So you see three stories of faithfulness of God's people, and then the three stories end up in them suffering, but ultimately being blessed for their faithfulness. All right, so there's a sub-theme. Faithfulness leads to some suffering, but ultimately blessing. Okay, so that's one of the sub-themes. There's a second sub-theme. It shows that suffering comes because of super arrogant kings, right? And then we see that in chapter 4 and chapter 5, when Nebuchadnezzar thinks that he's like God, right? See, when you get power, that's what you think. And then God has to bring him down. And then chapter 5 shows his son, Belshazzar, drinking from the holy vessels of God's temple in an orgy. Who does he think he is, right? Using God's vessels for an orgy. God hammers them down. Okay? Well, Nebuchadnezzar becomes a beast, like an animal for 7 days. Mental problem. His son gets killed that very night. He fools around with God's holy vessels, right? So what is it? Sub-theme. Sub-theme is these kings, after a while, think they're like gods. They become like beasts, right? Instead of subjecting to God, they want to be gods. Sub-theme, huh? What other sub-theme? It shows us that another sub-theme is the visions. The visions show that ultimately there will come a kingdom. Ultimately. At the end of time, there will be a kingdom. And that will be eternal kingdom. Amazing one. Okay? Sub-theme again. Enduring kingdom. Everlasting kingdom. Okay? So these are the three sub-themes in the big theme. Okay? Now, let's look at Daniel. Who was Daniel? Daniel was a teenager probably when the Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, conquered Jerusalem, hadn't burned it yet, and he took out the royal, the elite of Jerusalem. And Daniel, being of the royal line, all the princes, there are many, kings had a lot of wives and a lot of princes, and the princes were taken out, right, to Babylon. And Daniel, all right, was in Babylon, and God blessed him, and he served under 4 kings. That's amazing. 2 Babylonian kings, Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, and 2 Medo-Persian kings. So we just say Persian, all right? Medo-Persian kings, right? Darius and Cyrus. So he served under 4 kings, 2 different, shall we say, empires. Okay? Quite unusual, very, very rare. And he was not serving, he was a super civil servant. He was like PM level, Prime Minister level. Okay, so that was Daniel. Now let's look at chapter 1. In chapter 1, it tells us that the Babylonian king brought out these hostages, this royal line, and one of the purposes of the Babylonian king was to train an elite civil service because he had to rule an empire. So he wanted the best brains, very much like Singapore. We have scholarships to get all the best and brightest to Singapore because we don't capture them or kidnap them. We entice them with scholarships. So in those days, they used a different source of getting what we call good brains, good manpower. So they get the best and brightest from different places, hostages, and then they are brought into the king's court and they are selected like interview, like a scholarship interview. And then Daniel and his three friends, okay, all royal line, royalty, or probably teenagers. That's the best time to indoctrinate. And like in Singapore, we give scholarships to teenagers, usually in secondary school, so their brain becomes Singaporean, and one day, hopefully, they stay in Singapore and increase or give us a better genetic pool of bright people, right? So same thing, same old, any wise ruler would do that. Okay, and one of the first things they did to Daniel and his friends was to change their names. Okay, you'll find the name Daniel, it ends with L, that's God. Mishael, another guy there, all right, L, and two of them ended with Yah, right, Hananiah, right, Ezra, right, that is Jehovah, okay, Jehovah. So basically, they changed their names from the names of their gods to the name of Babylonian gods. So they had new names. Daniel became Belteshazzar, which is the name of a Babylonian god. And all the others, also Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are all names of Babylonian gods. So the idea was to give them a new identity. Their loyalty now is to Babylon. Now, they never protested that. What's in the name anyway? You can call me anything you like. That's your choice, right? But when they were put into the college, all right, this elite school to be trained, one of their things was their diet. They wanted them to look impressive, big and strong guys, so they would get lots of meat and the best, finest food. But being Jews, they couldn't eat food that was not kosher, was not killed according to Jewish law. The blood had to be shed and killed. Animals had to be killed in a certain way, and only certain animals could not be eaten too. But when they were offered the food, they said, no, we cannot eat this food. See, the names they didn't bother, but the food, they said, no, we can't eat this food. So they negotiated with the chief, the one in charge of their training, all right, maybe we call him the dorm supervisor, and they said, can we eat our own food? We can't eat the meat because it's not killed according to our laws. And can we just eat veg? At least that's safe, right? So they wanted to eat beans. And so the dorm supervisor is a bit nervous. He said, now, if I allow you to do that, you look skinny and scrawny. Now, how are you going to stand before the king? I'm in deep trouble. All right? Not only must you be trained mentally, culturally, but look good, right? But they negotiated and said, give us 10 days. Well, that's a very short time. I mean, that's almost like a miracle. And 10 days, you decide whether we look better than the other guys. I mean, how do you change your looks in 10 days? Ask any guy that goes to the gym and that's not possible, right? But after 10 days, the guy comes back and says, my goodness, you guys look better, right? Basically, they wanted them to be fleshy, right? All cultures, we are the new culture that wants to be skinny. All cultures love to be pudgy, right? Show that you're prosperous, okay? So it worked out, okay? And you know what? At the end of it, it's like the end of their, course. They went for interview with the king, and they were found to be 10 times better than all the rest. Imagine that you ace your exam, all right? Your civil service examination, and you go into the elite administrative service. What is this lesson there? They were willing to make a stand for God, thinking that it will maybe cost them. They kicked out of the school, but on the other hand, they became the top students. So be faithful in little things. They purpose in their heart. It says, Daniel purpose in his heart that I will do right. When you have a choice, do right and be faithful to stand in little things. One day, God, he can stand before the lions, all right? Now, second chapter is a different thing altogether. Now they're all in the civil service, elite civil service. And one day, Nebuchadnezzar has a crazy night. He cannot sleep. he had a horrible dream. He wakes up and forgot his dream. That's quite common, right? And so he tells, he's very troubled that he needs to know this dream because it's definitely something that troubled him. And in his mind, something very important. So what he does is he calls all his wise men. You see, the civil service are always the best and brightest, all right? And he calls them and said, hey, I want you guys to tell me my dream and the interpretation. And all the wise guys freak out and say, what are you talking about? It's impossible. No king has ever asked this. You tell us your dream, and then we can interpret your dream. And Nebuchadnezzar, he's like Hitler, he's a monster. He says, no, you're just buying time because I can't remember it. And if you ask me to tell you the dream, I can't tell you, so you're safe. No, you don't tell me my dream, and I kill all of you. All of you. The whole civil service wiped out. Wow, okay. So when the executioner had to give the news, including to Daniel and his guys, Daniel said, what's happening? And he was told that the king's gone mad. The king's going to kill all of you because if you can't tell his dream, all the wise men, the entire civil service, the elite would be killed because you're all useless. No good to me. And Daniel said, wait, hold it. Let me pray. So he calls his 3 buddies and they have a prayer meeting and they pray. And you know what? God shows him the dream and the interpretation. So he says, let me go and see the king. And he stands before the king and he says, the God of heaven has told me this. This is your dream. And what was the dream? It was about a massive statue, right? And of course, Nebuchadnezzar said, exactly, that's my dream. What does it mean? And it means the statue was a head of gold, the breast, chest, arms, silver, the belly and the thighs, brass, the legs, the lower legs, iron, reaches down to the toes. It's no more iron, it's iron and clay mixed up. What in the world is this statue? Right? Massive statue. And Daniel says, this are the kingdoms that will come. Right? The head of gold is you. See, Babylon was a glorious empire. Very gorgeous, the hanging gardens of Babylon. Babylon was like, whoa, it's by the beautiful rivers and everything was perfect. Glorious, that's the word. Gold is glorious, impressive. The second would be chest, 2 arms, right? That would be the Medo-Persian Empire, M-E-D-O, okay? Now we forget who were the Medes. The Medes, they were M-E-D-E-S, right? The second empire is the Medo-Persian Empire. It's good, but it's not as glorious as yours, silver. The third empire, no great glorious place, but very powerful. Greek, Alexander the Great. He never built any great cities or like Babylon or anything like that, but he conquered a lot, right? And then the last one of iron, the Romans, okay? So this is basically told, I'm interpreting it for you, all right? Because later we will see the interpretation, not in chapter 2, right? He just told that you are the gold, followed will be the silver, blah, blah, blah. And finally, the last one would be many little toes and fragmented. That's the Roman Empire at the end. And Nebuchadnezzar is so impressed, all right? He says, wow. And he elevates Daniel to be the prime minister, basically, effectively, right? And, of course, Daniel then asks his friends to help him to rule, okay, in the province of Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar, your God, he must be the God of gods, okay? Now, what's actually Daniel saying? He says, your kingdom will be smashed down one day. That's basically what he's saying. and the meats think they're big, the Greeks will smash. Basically, the theme is the same. Kingdoms come, kingdoms will go. Don't be too arrogant. Don't be too impressed. If you're the king, don't be arrogant. If you're a subject, don't be too impressed, all right? Or depressed, depends on which way you look at it, okay? So that was how he was elevated from elite service to PM level, all right? Prime Minister level. Lesson, chapter 3. Now the king gets so egoistical. Instead of thinking it, that, my goodness, one day the Medo-Persians will wipe us out. He's the head of gold. He only focuses on the gold part. And then he gets so excited, he builds a golden statue, all right, 90 feet tall, all right. Puts it on the plain so that it stands out really high. And then he makes a decree that whenever the national anthem is played, or whatever anthem, I mean some song is played, everybody's got to bow to this golden idol, which is basically him, right? Now, of course, Daniel's 3 friends, who are top civil servants now, refuse to bow. And there is a decree that if anybody doesn't bow, he will be burned in a furnace of fire. So the 3 refuse to bow, and then what happens is they are thrown into the furnace of fire. Now the king says he's so angry that some people don't bow towards him. You see, this is the arrogance of people when they have power. I don't even know what's so good about people bowing to you, but it's something weird that happens to people when they have power. They want everybody to serve them. And so he throws this, he takes, make the fire 7 times hotter. This is stupid. I mean, you want to torture someone, make the fire slow, right? 7 times, you kill him straight away. There's no torture. It shows idiots become kings, right? And so he throws them in the fire, but he realizes they're not dead. In fact, he somehow peeps through the door of the furnace, and he sees they're walking around, and there's not 3 of them, there's 4 of them walking in the fire. That's ridiculous. And one of them, he says, looks like the Son of God. So it must be some angelic being. Some say it's maybe the pre-incarnate Christ. And then he calls them out, and they come out. They don't even smell of smoke. You guys smoke cigarette, you can smell smoke. In the furnace, they don't smell smoke. And he comes out and says, my goodness, your God must be the God. Idiot. You already said Daniel's God is the God of gods. You idiot. Don't you know that these guys worship the same God? All right? What's wrong with you? Are you thick in your head? He was, obviously. All right? When you're proud, you get thick. You get stupid. All right? And so he acknowledges that, oh my goodness, these guys, gods, are the real gods. At least for a while he acknowledges that. Okay? Then in chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream one night. This time he remembers the dream, okay? The dream is about a huge tree that reaches up to the heavens, and under that tree are all the birds and the animals take their shade and get their food from this massive, massive tree, right? And then suddenly there is a voice that smashes down the tree, okay? And what is this? Okay? And the tree is smashed down and left a stump. And the stump. And then the voice says, you will be a beast for 7 years. Right? Now, he's troubled. He doesn't know what all this is. So he calls all his wise men again, and they cannot come up with an interpretation. Finally, Daniel pops up and interprets the dream for him. Of course, Daniel is very embarrassed to tell him, hey, king, this big tree is you. God bless you. all the kingdoms, the empires are under you, and you have the rule over them. They need you, they're under you. But one day, God is going to make you nothing, just a stump. What do you mean by that? You will be a beast for 7 years. You will be like an animal, behave like an animal for 7 years. But strangely enough, your kingdom will not be gone. It'll still be there. And after 7 years, when you get back your mind, the kingdom will still be there. The stump is still there, and the tree can still grow. Oh, okay. And so, of course, you think the king will be mad. You said, I'm going to be an animal? But the king is so impressed that he actually praises Daniel, right? And says, wow, you're amazing, all right, that you can interpret this dream. Now, what is God doing to this arrogant, terrible man? God's giving him another chance, for goodness sake. All right, first time he realizes Daniel's God's the real God. Then the three men's God's the real God. And now he is not God. He's just a mere man who can be reduced to a beast like that. And one stroke from God, the God that he acknowledged earlier. You know what? The thick brain of his, so proud, cannot digest it. Cannot figure it. You tell a proud man his problems, I don't think he gets it. Right? He's so full of himself, we use that word, that nothing else can get in. Okay? So what happens is, after a while, one day, he goes up to the palace. After this, 1 year later, he looks around and said, look at my empire. I built it. I built this whole thing by my power, for my honor, and for my glory. Wow, okay? And then that very moment, he goes crazy. You know how mental you can get, mentally deranged through one event, and he behaves like an animal. It's so embarrassing. So they had the courtiers or whatever, his sons had to put him aside, and he lived with the animals. All right, let me give you a little background story, and this is probably true. Nebuchadnezzar, this is historical, married a beautiful girl from Tehran, Persia. Tehran, if you know today, is surrounded by mountains. Beautiful place. All right. Babylon's flat. And so this beautiful queen he married missed her hometown so much, the mountains. And so the king wanted to impress his bride, and he said, I'll make you a mountain. So he filled the plains of Babylon and literally made a beautiful mountain-like structure. It became one of the 7 wonders of the world, called the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. In the old days, there were 7 wonders of the world. This is one of them. People came to look, it's like, whoa, this is amazing, a man-made mountain with beautiful trees and everything planted. And she also missed the animals that used to roam in the mountains in her own old home of Tehran. And so he made a zoo up there full of animals for her, so that she could look at from the palace, look at this beautiful thing and remind herself of her home. And the story is probably that Nebuchadnezzar ended up in that zoo up there with the animals, right, for 7 years. Says his fingernails grew like birds' claws. That's possible. If he recluses, the fingernails go really long after a while. Right? Hair gets shaggy, and he became deranged. But after 7 years, when he acknowledged, I don't know how, that he is not God, there is a God in heaven. And then he was mentally normal again and became king again. Wow, all right. This is so bizarre, that you just can't get it. All right. In fact, I like one part that Daniel said to him, right, when he interpreted the dream. Let me read to you Daniel chapter 4, verse 17. It's almost when he's interpreting to the king. Imagine a man telling the king, Daniel 4, verse 17. Let me see that. Yeah. This is Daniel telling him, but before he became an animal. The sentence is by decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will and sets over it the lowliest of men. How do you like that? How do you like your civil servant to tell the emperor, right? Let me tell you, this tree, God's going to chop it down. And the tree is you. And the reason is, God wants you to know that it is God that allows you to be where you are. He sets you up. And you know who he usually chooses? The lowliest of men. I think the thick numbskull of this guy, full of pride, never got it. Right? But when I read it, I was amused. Right? He is walking around strutting his thing like, wow, I'm so smart, I conquered all this. And God said, you know what? I put idiots up there. Right? I don't know why people want power. It's the worst place to be. Right? I don't get it, But anyway, a lot of people fight for power. Right? Okay, so story number one, he's humble. And he dies. Nebuchadnezzar dies. His son, Belshazzar, not Belteshazzar, Belshazzar. Belteshazzar is Daniel. Belshazzar, all the gods have that name, something like that. Becomes the next king. And he's going to celebrate. He's an orgy. Wine is drinking, and he needs beautiful cups for his beautiful wine. And he calls, get up the golden cups from where my father took out of the of the holy temple in Jerusalem. Those beautiful cups for serving God. And they drink the orgy out of the cups. And that very night, a finger, dismembered, just a finger, imagine just one finger running around, writing on the wall the words. The writing is on the wall, right? Mini, mini, tekel, fasin. What does that mean? He can read it, but he can't understand it, right? And he freaks out, he's trembling. And all the people, can you imagine a dismembered finger right before your eyes? One little finger, maybe index finger, writing on the wall. My goodness, anybody's hair would stand on end. I would tremble too. And he calls for all the wise men. And finally they call for Daniel. Daniel says, you know what that means? You have been measured, assessed by God, and weighed in the balance and found unworthy to be king. And so your kingdom will be taken away. I'm paraphrasing. And you know what? That very night, I'm sure after that they stopped drinking, because even if they were, high, they will be low after that, seeing that dismembered finger. And that very night, Darius, the Medo-Persian conqueror, came into the fortress of Babylon, almost unconquerable, took over that very night, killed Belshazzar, and that was the end of the Babylonian Empire. Wow, just like that. Okay? Really, God puts you and God takes you down. Okay? And that was chapter 5. Okay? Now, Darius likes Daniel. So Darius made Daniel the chief of his ministers, prime minister. Okay? And of course, the others are very jealous. I mean, he used to serve the Babylonians. Now the Persians come in and they still choose this guy. Doesn't make sense. He's an old man at this time, probably in his 80s. And of course, the younger guys don't like that. This guy is we will never get our promotion, right? There's no retirement age. You know what? Civil service always a retirement age, so the young Turks get their chance, right? So they have to fix this guy so they can get promoted. So they plan to tell the new king, right, that, let's test the loyalty of all our people. Make a decree that nobody is to seek the help of any other authority, God, power, whatever, except you. In other words, prove their loyalty is to you, not some other outside power. They knew that's the only way they could fix Daniel because he's incorruptible. So the best way to fix him, very simple. They knew he would pray because he was a public prayer. Every day, 3 times a day, he would go up to his room, windows wide open, pray towards Jerusalem. Public. He never denied his faith and his God. And when the decree was made, he did it again. Stood towards Jerusalem and prayed to his God. And they reported him. And the king said, tried to get out of this, because the decree was if anyone within the 30 days sought help from any other, he should be thrown into a lion's den. Obviously, the Medo-Persian way of killing was different from the normal furnace den of hungry lions. And so, he wants to pull out, make an excuse for Daniel, because he liked Daniel, he trusted Daniel, but he can't. He made the decree. And so they throw him into the lion's den. And the king that night was so troubled. Couldn't sleep. Wakes up early in the morning, rushes to the lion's den, and somehow he senses the God of Daniel was saying, Daniel, are you there? And Daniel said, yeah, I'm here. I'm fine. Wow. And they open the door, and Daniel comes out. Totally protected. Some people say the lions were well fed, that's why they didn't eat him. I like the story, you see. The chapter 6 doesn't let the story end there. The king now was so angry with those who plotted to fix Daniel that he got all of them arrested, including their families, and threw them into the lion's den. And the story says the lions had a good meal that day with those guys. So obviously they were hungry, right? But God protected Daniel. Okay, now, many people, Sunday school stories show Daniel was strapping man standing in the lion's den. That's a misrepresentation. Daniel was like 80 years old at this time. He had served Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, he's not a young guy, right? You count the years, he's not young. Anyway, that is the story of the easy part of the book of Daniel. All right, we'll take a break here because the prophecy part is going to be a lot different. The mood is going to be very different. But what have we learned thus far? All right, the theme. God tells Nebuchadnezzar, kings, empires will come and go. Don't be egoistical. Be humble. But he can't. He can't. All right? Belshazzar can't. All right? They feel proud. And basically, don't worry. Relax. We live under terrible kingdoms now. But in 70 years, you live under a bad king. It's okay. Relax. One day, the God who can pull down Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, one day that God will come, set up an eternal kingdom. You live forever there, right? Okay, so that is basically the theme of the book of Daniel. Not so much, how many years. Later we see prophecy, people will argue about how many days and all that. I don't think, all right, because if good men keep differing, then maybe it's wise that we learn the principles of the Bible, the big picture. Right? Let's take a break now before we go on to the prophetic